59 of the Hannah on the Road podcast. I'm Hannah-Lisa, your host for today and always, and as usual, I'm coming to you from my living room here in Berlin, where it's a grey winter day, which I actually don't really mind that much. This is a podcast about knitting and making, so making primarily knitting, although I do so every once in a while, and running a creative business, because I do run a few creative businesses and I love to talk about that. Today is Monday, and the very first thing that I want to talk about is that I have a little, let's not call it a resolution, but I want to try and get into the habit of recording every second Monday or every other Monday, and then edit that video and upload it so that it is uploaded either Monday night or Tuesday morning, so that you know when to expect new videos from me on this channel. If you want to have an additional alert in your email inbox every time that I upload a new video, you can just subscribe. There is a little subscribe button somewhere, and just click on that and then you'll get email notifications if you want that. So yes, I am honestly feeling a little bit under the weather today. I'm not really sure what it is. Maybe it's something I ate or something. I don't really feel too well today, but I'm hoping that this won't impact on my on my capacity to record this podcast. Oh my god. Sorry guys. It's been a weird, well, it hasn't been a weird couple of weeks, but it's been the first couple of weeks back into work life, which I personally find always a little bit not really exhausting, but I think it's just hard to get back into the swing of things, even though you know, I had all my systems set up and all my plans and everything. I just think it's, I don't know, something about my body and my brain needs to shift again when I get back to work. So there's that. I do have a full episode planned for today. There are a couple of topics that I want to talk about before we go into what I've been working on. And then I have a longer segment planned for running your creative business, where I want to talk about a topic that is really relevant for, I think, all of us at the beginning of a new year, which is budget. And I also have two book recommendations at the very end of this episode. I decided that I wanted to start doing sort of semi-regular topic discussions in the running a creative business segment, and I will talk a little bit about that when we get there. Before we get into all the sort of making related things, a little bit of administrati. You can find me as Hannah on the Road on Instagram and all the other social media, but Instagram is where I'm most active. And if you want to find show notes for this episode and all episodes, you can find them on my website, and the link to that is also in the down bar below. All of this aside, the first thing that I want to talk about is something that has come to my attention because of an email that got sent to me after episode 28, which was the last episode that I recorded. Now, in that episode, I shared a few gifts that I had received, namely a couple of skeins of yarn and a coloring book for mittens. I got a very lovely, I have to say that, a very lovely email from a long-term viewer, and it was quite interesting because she asked why I presented products on the podcast that were clearly sent to me as a review, why I was presenting them as gifts, and that she didn't feel that this was appropriate, and that she hoped that my podcast wouldn't turn into a review-only podcast. So there are a few things that I want to clarify around that, also because I think, especially in these times where a lot of people are active on YouTube, they have their own YouTube channels, And especially in the knitting world, the podcasting community has grown, I think, a bit more professional over the last years, as far as I can tell, in terms of the quality of videos that is produced and so on and so forth. I think it is very important to be very clear around policies like reviews and things like that. So I want to spend a little bit of time before we dive into the meaty content of this week to talk about this and how I want to handle this for this podcast, or how I do handle this for this podcast. So first of all, the one thing that I really appreciated was that she actually sent me that email and told me about how she felt, because otherwise I would have never approached this topic, because for me it was very clear what I was doing, but obviously it wasn't very clear. So for me, it is really important that there is a very clear distinction between things that are acquired by me, which means I spent money on them, things that are sent to me as gifts, which means that they were sent to me by friends, or by friends, who else would send me anything as a gift, who really just want to genuinely thank me for something that I did, or who want to make me happy with those gifts. And the third category is products that are sent as reviews. So explicit or maybe implicit, let's go into that a little bit later into detail, but essentially products that are sent by companies and or individuals who want them to be reviewed by me on the podcast, and that is the only purpose for why they send them to me. So I have always done this in the past, but I want to make it very explicit about how I handle these things. I always say, if something is an acquisition, this is why sometimes if you go back through my show notes, the title of the segment where I talk about things that have come into my life is sometimes called acquisitions, sometimes it's called acquisitions and gifts, sometimes it's called gifts. By that title, you can distinguish what I'm talking about, but I will make a lot of effort to be very specific when I talk about the products in that segment in this podcast, to tell you in which of these three categories they fall. Okay, so first thing, acquisitions. Obviously anything that I have acquired, that I've spent money on, things like that. I will also tell you if I got a discount because of my capacity as a podcaster or in any other capacity. So far, honestly, this hasn't happened. Like, I think I got gifted a skein once where I bought something, but that was clearly not because I was a podcaster or anything, but because I was friends with the person that I was buying from. So I will always make very sure that I am 100% transparent when it comes to how, like, not how much I paid for it, but if there was a discount involved and things like that. So that covers the first part of products that are presented on this podcast, acquisitions. The second part, gifts, and this applies to what I shared in the last episode, are really things that I did not pay for, but that someone sent to me because they wanted to make me happy. Now, I get where it gets confusing, because that is the overlap between what is a gift and what is a review item, right? And I do understand that I need to be better at really explaining very clearly why something has come into my life as a gift and something that has come into my life as a review item. So until now, I've never, not once in my entire podcasting career, received any item purely for review purposes. I know that there are a lot of channels out there and people who receive that, and I myself as a business owner have done so with my project bags. I've sent out project bags for reviews to other podcasters, but so far none of this has ever happened to me, and I will make sure to tell you when that is. Now, gifts are an entirely different story in my book. Gifts are things that are sent to me by friends who want to thank me for something, for example, or who just want to make me happy, right? So, coming back to last week's episode, Alex Coloring Mittens book was a gift because she wanted to thank me for kicking her butt indirectly by creating the Get Shit Done challenge, in which she herself created this book. She never ever said anything explicitly in any email or any conversation asking me to review the book or show it on the podcast. Now I know that you might think, oh, but maybe she expected that, or maybe implicitly it was sort of an agreement thing like that. No, it wasn't. And this is where this overlap between gifts and reviews is very clear. You can trust me in that I am not stupid, and in that I understand when someone tries to get in front of this camera with their products, right? Even if they don't explicitly ask for it. If I'm approached by someone that I have no relationship whatsoever before, and it's like, hey, I would like to send you a gift. No, this is not a gift. This is a review. You clearly want something in return, right? If it's someone that I've known for over a year, like with Alex, approaches me and says, look, I want to send you this. You've done brilliant work. You've kicked my butt. You made this happen. I just want to send it to you and say thank you. This is a gift. Yeah? And I chose to show it just because I was genuinely happy about that gift. It was never meant as a product review, and it was clearly not sent by Alex in order to get in front of this camera. So, in this muddly gray area of gifts and reviews, I will try to be as clear as possible, but you also have to trust me in that I will tell you clearly when I'm presenting something that might have implicitly, explicitly been presented as a gift, but that is more of a review item. Okay? I promise you that I will try to be really, really explicit about how all of the products that I present on this podcast have come into my world, whether I've acquired them, meaning I paid money for them, whether they were gifts or whether they were sent to me for free and are review items, because I think this is incredibly important in the podcasting world that we are very, very clear about all of this. Yeah? In addition to that, I want to say that everything that I present on this podcast, I do so because I want to. I would never ever present something here, let alone talk positively about it, that I don't like, that I perceive as being, I don't know, unethical or intransparently produced or anything like that, you know? Like you can't buy this opinion. You can't buy space on this podcast. So you can trust, even if I'm doing a review, that I am being honest with this, with what I say. Now, because this has never happened, no one has ever said, hey Annalisa, would you like to review this? And I said, yeah, sure, I would, right? I don't know how that happens, right? But if this happens, and if I receive items that I don't like, or products where I'm like, then I will also say my opinion on that on the podcast, because I think you also deserve to know about that. So if you want me to review products, by all means, you can ask me to do so, but I will give my honest opinion, because I think I owe that to you, to the viewers. So I hope this a little bit lengthy segment around my policies around acquisitions, gifts, and review items has cleared this up a little bit. Again, please, 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 if you feel that I have treated something inappropriately, that I haven't been clear enough with where certain things come from, how they came into my life, please do so as the viewer did and send me an email or a message or something. Just reach out to me and let me know, because otherwise I would have never known that some of you might have perceived it the same way as she did, and I wouldn't have known to talk to you about it and to make it very clear about what's always been in my head about the policy around these things. Okay, alrighty. Let's move on, and this is a nice segue into something that I also wanted to talk about, because it has something to do with my status as a podcaster, but it isn't really a review, but it is an event. And you might have seen that on my Instagram, and I have talked about this here before, that I am going to Edinburgh Yarn Festival this year again, which is happening in mid of March in Edinburgh. And I am super, super, super excited and very happy to announce that I have been selected as one of the official podcasters participating in the Blacker Yarns podcast launch for this year's EYF. And I am so incredibly excited about that. So, I think that must have been back in November, I received an email through the Edinburgh Yarn Festival newsletter mailing list saying that they were now accepting applications for podcaster lounge seats, so to say. So I'm not sure if I merely wasn't aware of that last year or if they changed their application system. I didn't know before that there was a possibility to apply for a podcaster seat, so to say. But I really, really like that because I feel that it makes it a bit more transparent. You know, you can apply, you can fill out a form and someone is going to review that, and it's not just, you know, you're picking podcasters to be part of the launch that you already know, or, you know, something like that. So I was really, really positively surprised by that. And I decided to apply on a whim. I was like, okay, there's probably no chance in hell that I will get one of the, I think they had like 20, 25 or 30 spots, because every podcaster in Europe and probably over Europe, like in the entire knitting world, will apply. But I will do it anyways. And I got accepted, which is, I love it. I love it. I'm just so happy that someone else sees the value, or I mean, I know that you guys see the value, but like someone who I respect, who puts up one of the biggest yarn festivals in the world and who does one of the best podcasts in the world with Louise from Knit British, that they thought that I would be a good part of the Blacker podcast launch. So yes, that is happening. What does that mean concretely? So it means that I will take part in at least one podcaster event while I am in Edinburgh. It will also mean that you will get a little bit more coverage of things related around Edinburgh Yarn Festival here. And I will also try my best to participate in the Blacker Podcal, which is the Blacker Yarn knit along happening before the Edinburgh Yarn Festival. And I am currently waiting for a little something that Blacker Yarns wanted to send to me, and I'm assuming all other participating podcasters with which I want to cast something on for that cal. So this is happening. I'm incredibly excited about it. If you want to see who else is going to be featured podcaster or podcaster officially selected for the launch, you can go to the website of the Edinburgh Yarn Festival and you can see all the lovely faces who are going to be there as well. So that's that, and I'm really, really excited about it. So yeah. Thank you again so much to Joe and Mika and also Louise from the Knit British podcast for selecting me. I am incredibly honored and I can't wait to meet you all in person. Speaking of in person, I would love to know if you are going to Edinburgh Yarn Festival, so just leave a comment down below. And I know that also the general admission tickets that were on pre-sale have already sold out. I think it was like this super quickly, but judging from my experience last year, it's also no problem whatsoever to get tickets at the door, and especially because they're increasing their seating this year, which I think is awesome because it was pretty crammed last year. I don't think you would have any problems whatsoever getting tickets at the door. So yes, this is the second announcement. I'm going to Edinburgh Yarn Festival. I'm officially part of their podcaster launch and I couldn't be more excited about that. So let's move on into the making part of this podcast. And I don't have any finished objects, but I have 2 works in progress that I want to share with you. And those are the same works in progress that I shared with you last week, but they've grown a little bit, or last time. So I was hoping to have this first work in progress done, but honestly there are 4 rows missing plus the bind off. I couldn't bring myself to staying up another 2 or 3 hours last night and get it done. I thought I would just show you like it is. And this is my Black Forest cardigan. And let me figure out a way to actually show you this. So this is, I call it lovingly, my gigantic beast of squishiness, because it is the squishiest fabric ever, and it's a beast. Honestly, you guys, this is no joke. But let's talk about it. So this is a pattern from the book that I published with Making Stories last year, which is called Woods, and it's a pattern by Verena Cross. And here you can see a few of the pattern photos. So it's this super squishy cardigan knit in fisherman's rib, top down with a shawl collar. And this is exactly what I am working on at the moment. So I believe when I showed this to you last time, I had finished one sleeve and the second one was still missing. So I did the second sleeve and then there is this gigantic squishy shawl collar that I'm working on at the moment, which is knit in ribbing, and I love it. And you can see that it's quite deep here, but this is because it's going to be folded over. So there are 4 rows still missing on this shawl collar, and because it's like 260 plus stitches, it takes me quite a while to work 1 row. And then the bind off, which I'm thinking I want to do a tubular bind off. I will have to investigate and look at other people's project pages, what they've done, and I will look at the, I can actually do that right now. I wanted to see if I can sort of see what she did in the sample, and I'm pretty sure it's a tubular bind off, which will be painful for that amount of stitches, but probably so worth it. Let's talk about the yarn. So this is Dererum Natura Surano in the colorway Doré, and I know that I said last time that this is 100% French merino, but it actually might not be 100% French merino, because on the ball band it says that it's 2 French sheep breeds and 1 sheep breed from Portugal, depending on the color that you choose. So when I want to, I think I'm going to look into this a little bit more to see if my colorway actually has the Portuguese wool in it or not. In any case, it is entirely made in Europe and I love it, and it's great yarn, and I can't wait to have this in my wardrobe and wear it. And I'm kind of envisioning it over something like what I'm wearing today, a simple white or whatever other colored top, and then jeans, and I think it's gonna be lovely. So Black Forest cardigan available in the book, and next time I see you I will have this finished. The second work in progress that I want to share with you is my Immortalis for Twins shawl. If you are curious about the longer story behind the shawl, please check out the last episode, episode number 28, because there I talk about it at length. But I wanted to show you the progress that I've made so far. So this is it, you guys. Looks like a little bib, right? So let's talk about this. This is a triangular shawl that I am, let's be positive and let's say I am designing this, right? Last week I said I am improvising this, but I think I put some people onto the wrong path for this. So I did not invent this stitch pattern, for example, right? Like I took this from a stitch dictionary. But I am designing this insofar as this is not from an existing pattern, and I am actually pondering if I want to write this up as a pattern. If you'd be interested in that, leave me a comment down below just so that I can gauge interest. And yeah, let's talk about what's going on here. So I first started with some stockinette stitch and then integrated this lovely textured stitch pattern, more stockinette stitch, and then I did something where I'm super happy that it turned out the way that I envisioned it, and this is the way that I incorporated the second color. You can see these little columns, right, of the 2 colors, and they look exactly as I wanted it. And there's no color work involved. Isn't that awesome? Now I'm on to the stockinette part of the second color, and then it's going to continue like this. The yarn that I'm using is Quince & Co. Chickadee, and the first colorway is called Honey, the second colorway is called Fox, and I do have the third one with me here. and it's this. I don't know the name of this by heart, but yeah, I wanted to show it to you. And it's living in one of my very own project bags, which I'm loving at the moment. This is the medium size and it's so good for a shawl this size. So yeah, I'm really genuinely very happy with how this turns out. And yeah, I hope that it will continue to grow the way that I envision it to be. But I think I'm gonna first finish the cardigan because I want to have that off my needles. And I need something new, don't I? I think I need something new. Let's see, maybe I'll have a new cast on for you next time. Now on to making. I actually don't have any gifts, acquisitions, review items this week, but I do have some shop news, because the first thing that I wanted to talk about is my new newsletter for knitters. So I've written a newsletter for creative bosses, which are essentially everyone who runs a creative business, for the better part of a year now. And I recently decided to start a second newsletter that is all about knitting and making, and I'm sharing what I am currently working on. I'm also sharing projects that inspire me, Instagram accounts that I love, and all those good things. And there will be a link in the down bar below, as well as in the show notes, where you can sign up for it. I sent out the first one last week and it will go out every other week, so I'm really excited about that. It's also the place where I will be sharing shop update news from now on, so there won't be a separate shop update news email list thingy anymore, but it will be in that newsletter. So if you want to stay updated with regards to when I will update my shop, the best way to do that is actually to subscribe to the newsletter. I do always announce shop updates on Instagram, but I've had a few people comment, and I've experienced that myself with the changes in the Instagram algorithm. This is just not reliable anymore. So I always put it in my feed as well as in my stories, but these things, they just disappear, right? And yes, you can put on notifications for a specific Instagram account. I, for one, don't like to do that because it just makes my phone go, oh, and I don't like that. So I personally would always prefer signing up for something like a newsletter to get information like that. So I decided to offer that as well. All that to say that the shop is actually currently stocked. There are a few things in there, and there will be a few things added to the shop this week on Thursday, which is January 25th at 7 p.m. Berlin time. And this will be a small shop update because I will actually be having another one next week. But I wanted to show you what is currently in there and what you can expect to get into the shop by the end of the week. So let's go from small to large. So in terms of, let's see, now everything's falling to the floor. In terms of small project bags, the ones that are currently in the shop are forest green, mulled wine, and pine cones. And the ones that are going to be added to the shop are a few very limited editions, because they were all part of various collaborations last year and I still had some fabric left over. So I decided to whip them up into smaller project bags so that you could also have them without the kits being available anymore. I've had a few people reach out regularly after every collaboration that I did, I think, asking if I would be stocking the fabrics into the shop, and I haven't decided yet what my policy about that is going to be going forward. But for the ones that I had still a bit of fabric left, I decided that I wanted to whip them up. So the first one that is going to go into the shop is this lovely gray project bag in the small size. The second one is this lovely olive green. And the third one, and there's actually only going to be one of this fabric in this size, is the winter white that I had with Ida last year. So this is from the collaboration with Maria, this is Ida, and this was Saskia and Verena. So I love all of these, and I think they're perfect for the weather that we're currently having. Then I also have a few medium-sized project bags, so I won't have any special ones added to the shop, but there are all these lovely colors right now. So again, mulled wine, pine cone, charcoal, burgundy, and forest green. And this is the size that I'm using to host my shawl. So this is perfect for big squishy hats, smaller shawl projects, 2 at a time socks, all these kinds of things. And it's one of my favorite things that I did last year, inventing this new size. Now, there are also a few large project bags in stock, and again, we have pine cone, we have mulled wine, we have charcoal, and we have forest green, as well as burgundy. And there will also be 3 very, very limited ones of this winter white fabric going into the shop on Thursday. So I have this gigantic pile of project bags here, which I'm really, really happy about, because one of the things that I want to do this year is get better at inventory management and stocking up on bags before they go into the shop, so that I can also offer faster shipping times. So all of these are ready to ship. If they are in the shop, you can get them. And then one of the things that I also wanted to mention, which I haven't really worked on yet, but I want to do so maybe this week or next week, is reinventing my bag names, because I read an article. For one, I think they were a bit boring. 2, I read an article that it's a lot more enticing if you have like really cool color names, you know, like Pantone doesn't really call the violet thingy, it's like lilac, violet, but it's like ultraviolet, and then Farrow and Ball have all these cool color names and anything. And I decided I wanted to have a little bit more fun with my bag names, so stay tuned for that. And then there are also going to be a few exciting changes coming to the shop later this year. Plus, I also have almost all of the collaborations for this year planned out already, which makes me incredibly excited. And yeah, I can't wait to share all of them with you. Looking at my cheat sheet, what else did I want to talk about? Oh, that was everything related to making and shop news. So now we're on to the second part of the podcast, which is running a creative business. And what I want to talk about today is budget. Money, money, money. And I want to talk about it today because at the beginning of the year, there is a very, very good chance that you want to start working on your accounts a little bit more, or you need to do tax stuff, or ideally you would want to start working from a budget. And I do think that is especially important when you run a creative business because of seasonality and because of the transparency that it will allow you and the better planning that it will allow you. So a little bit of backstory and philosophy around budgeting. I don't ever want to sell any of my companies, let alone raise external funding. So if you are aware of my background, I used to work in the startup world for a few years, and before that in management consulting. And one of the main reasons why I wanted out of the startup world is that a lot of the energy and the time, especially of top management, which I was a part of, is spent managing stakeholders and shareholders. So stakeholders are essentially everyone who has a stake in your company, meaning an interest. Shareholders are the ones that, generally speaking, give you money. They can come in various capacities. Shareholders, per definition, are people who own shares in your company. But depending on which company form you have, you can have people who own shares or people who gave you sort of like a loan, all sorts of different things. And from my experience, if you have other people than yourself invested in your company, you're going to spend a lot of time and a lot of energy making sure those people are happy. That means in practice that you're not really able to focus on bringing the company forward. Plus, it also limits your decision frameworks because you're not optimizing for, let's say, the long-term survival of your company anymore, but you're optimizing for the interests of those people who gave you money. And often those are not the same things. If I say I want to have a company that lasts 100 years and that is super sustainable in terms of environmentally friendliness, in terms of ethical standards, you know, and then I have external funding that wants to have a quick return on their investment that is as high as possible, those things might be at odds with each other. And a lot of the energy is spent trying to reconcile different interests, spent trying to explain to one party or the other why you did certain things. And it just really felt very frustrating and very constricting to me. So when I started my own company, I set out to not ever raise external funds. Ever. That means that I need to make the money that I need for a living, for doing with my companies, what I want to do with them, with the money that I make every single day, every single month, every single year. I can't rely on external loans. I can't rely on external funding flying into my bank account, but that I need to work for it myself. And that is where the budget comes in, because I can only do that and I can only work on this sort of like self-sustainability if I know how much money I need and how much money I make. So this is my very own personal reason why I think budgeting is essential. But then again, budgeting is essential for every business. You can't run a business that is profitable or at least pays for itself if you don't know how much money you're making and how much money you're spending. And budgeting is nothing else than knowing that, right? Knowing how much money you make every month and knowing how much money you spend every month, and ideally knowing like how much you spend on what and things like that. So that then, and this is where we come into the new year, when you start a new year or when you start a new month, you can plan ahead how much money you're likely going to make and how much money or you need to make and how much money you're going to spend. And one experience that I had over the last year is that my spending patterns are very, very different every month. December is crazy out there, and not only because it's Christmas and time for presents, but also because it's a time that I usually travel a lot, and it's a time that things like my own personal insurance and my business insurance and all of these things get sort of like, I get invoiced for them for the entire next year, right? Same thing for January. Again, so much money flowing out because things like my public transport ticket is due and other insurances and all of these things. So one thing that I learned when I started doing my budget for 2018 was that it really does make sense to not only look at budgeting over the entire year, but also in the individual months. So what I did was that I sat down and I looked at all the budgets that I had done for the various months of 2017, and I created a yearly budget for 2018, broke that down into the different months and broke that down again into how much I was spending each month or how much I could spend each month on which things, broadly speaking. Now, I know exactly every month how much money I need to be making. So when I plan out my month, I can look at the budget for the month and I can be like, okay, this month I need to make 3,500 euros. And how am I going to do that? I'm going to do that by making, I don't know, 2,000 euros with project bags and 1,000 euros with coaching and 500 euros with making stories, and then because taxes, right? 3,500 euros in is not 3,500 euros in the bank account because I need to pay income taxes. So maybe I need to make another 1,000 euros by doing freelance writing. So this is, broadly speaking, how I do my budgeting. And I really, really can only encourage you, especially if you're scared of your accounts, to look at them and look at them fast. I know that it is scary because you have no idea what to expect, but believe me, it is one of the most important things that you can do as a business owner, knowing how much money you need to make, because it will free up so much mental space. Really, like, you're scared because you don't know what's there, and usually what we're envisioning is a lot worse than what is actually there. So go do that. This is why I wanted to talk about budgeting. I know it's not the most exciting thing, but it is really, really important. And I also wanted to mention that if you are interested in learning more about budgeting, and even more, especially hands-on stuff like the apps that I use, or this, like the spreadsheet that I use, the categories that I use to break down where I spent my money, things like that. My very first Patreon video is actually about how to do a budget, and I thought this would be a good time to mention that. You can go back and watch it if you are already a Patreon of mine. If you aren't, it will cost you $10, not more, to access that video. You also get access to all the other videos that I published before. I think there are like 7 out there right now. And I will insert the link in the show notes and in the down bar below. So yeah, but don't worry, like, if you don't want to, or if you don't have the money to spend on Patreon, by no means do you need to watch that video to be able to do your budget, right? It is really as simple as sitting down with a pen and paper and figuring out, and probably like your laptop or wherever you access your bank statements, figuring out how much money you spend on what, on like groceries, on health insurance, on rent, on all of these things for the last months, and then figuring out how that relates to the money that you made. So that was budgeting, something that I really wanted to talk about. And the next thing that I really wanted to talk about, and this is also the last thing before I wrap up with a little bit of what's been happening in my life, our book recommendations. So I finished 2 books last week, and both of which I thought would be interesting to talk about because they relate in some capacity or another to what I do with my creative businesses. The first one is one that I think I have shown on the podcast before, and it is Let My People Go Surfing by Yvon Chouinard. I'm hoping I'm not butchering his name, the founder of Patagonia. And the subtitle, or the subtitles, very appropriately describe what is going on with this book. It's including 10 more years of business unusual, the education of a reluctant businessman. If you've been following me for a while, you know that I've been fascinated with Patagonia because they are one of the very few, very large organizations or corporations in the world that I know of whose primary purpose is not to make money. And their values are reflected in everything that I do. So when I think of Patagonia, the first thing that I think about is their repair centers. And I thought that that was quite an unusual thing to do. You know, it's a clothing company. So Patagonia, for every one of you who doesn't know what they do, they originally started out as a company that produced tools for climbing. And Yvon Chouinard was a climber, is a climber himself. And from there on, they ventured out into so-called soft things, so clothing, but primarily really sports-related clothing, from climbing to skiing to now fishing and all sorts of things. And I thought that it was quite interesting and quite unusual for a clothing company to offer that you can send in all of your used clothing and Patagonia clothing, and they would repair it and send it back to you. Or they also have repair centers in a lot of cities and in a lot of their stores where they can repair your clothes for you. And that is very contrary to how fashion works these days, right? We have Primark, we have H&M, we have all these companies that are intentionally designing their clothes so that they rip or that they disintegrate after a few washings, so that you buy more. And Patagonia does the exact opposite. So that is the first thing that intrigued me about them. And then I went on this quest at the end of last year of finding out more companies and finding out more about companies who were really doing work around, or who were centering everything that they did around a set of values. And I kept seeing this book pop up. And so I ordered it and I just finished it, and I really, really, really love it. I want to write a full book review at one point for the blog, because I think that is a little bit easier to do it justice than talking about it. But essentially, what this book describes is, or the book, let me put it the other way around. The book is structured in two parts. The first part is the history of Patagonia, which in itself is incredibly fascinating. I loved reading it, and it is very personal, it's very personable as well, and it has a lot of great photos and great stories in it. The second part of the book is where it really goes down into how their values relate to what they actually do, starting from who do they hire, where they offer childcare, with whom they work in their supply chain, who are their production partners, how they spend their money, how they relate to financing, what we talked about earlier. The entire topic of fundraising is also covered here. And I thought that this was incredible. It was so good and so detailed, which I loved. Like, it wasn't anything about like, oh, we value diversity, this is why we hire women, blah. But it really went down to very, very specific initiatives and things that they did that really made sure that their values are reflected in every single part of the organization. Which, if you ask me, is one of the core things that you need to do if you want to run a business based on what matters to you most. You can't just talk about it, you have to understand how these values that you have, how they relate to every single thing that you do in your own business. I'm thinking of recording a separate video, doing an in-depth review of this book, because I honestly don't think I can do it justice in the course of this video. Let me know if you'd be interested in that, but I will probably do it anyways after I've worked through it again. But I want to give you a little bit of a taster of how this book is like. One thing that I found especially fascinating is that the history part of Patagonia really relates to the values and how they work with those values in their current business, in a sense that in the early 90s they came to a point where they were really not in a good place. To quote here, our own company had exceeded its resources and limitations. We had become dependent, like the world economy, on growth we could not sustain. But as a small company, we couldn't ignore the problem and wish it away. We were forced to rethink our priorities and institute new practices. We had to start breaking the rules. We knew that uncontrolled growth put at risk the values that had made the company succeed so far. Those values can be expressed in a how-to operations manual that offers pat answers. We needed philosophical and inspirational guides to make sure we always asked the right questions and found the right answers. So what they did was that they went to Argentina and had what you would today call a management retreat, and came up with values. And this is their values. So this and that in turn then informed a set of philosophies, everything from product design philosophy to distribution philosophy to marketing philosophy to people philosophy. And that is what I found so fascinating. So going from this definition broadly of their values, then diving deeper into the different areas of a business and instituting these philosophies around them, and then going again another level deeper and then understanding what do these philosophies actually mean for who do we want to buy from, how do we set up a retail store, who do we hire. So this is what I found absolutely fascinating. And just to give you a little glimpse into what is in those values, let me read a little bit of them to you. We begin with the premise that all life on Earth is facing a critical time during which survivability will be the issue that increasingly dominates public concern. Where survivability is not the issue, the quality of human experience of life may be, as well as the decline in health of the natural world, as reflected in the loss of biodiversity, cultural diversity, and the planet's life support systems. The root causes of this situation include basic values embodied in our economic system, including the values of the corporate world. Primary among the problematic corporate values are the primacy of expansion and short-term profit over such other considerations as quality, sustainability, environmental and human health, and successful communities. The fundamental goal of this corporation is to operate in such a manner that we are fully aware of the above conditions and attempt to reorder the hierarchy of corporate values while producing products that enhance both human and environmental conditions. So then follows a list of values that they want to base this on. And I just found this incredibly inspiring. If you are running your own business and you're, as I am, struggling with why do I make product that increases consumerism and pollution in the world? How can I push myself to be better at this? How can I build a company based on what I want to convey, based on what matters to me? Then go pick up one of these books, and I will make sure to record a longer review of the book a little bit later in the year. One of the concrete changes that this has brought for me personally is that I grew increasingly more and more uncomfortable with the materials that I am using in my project bags over the last months, and especially during reading this book. Granted, there are a few of the items that I am using in the production of my project bags that I'm incredibly proud of. The linen that I use is made in Austria. The zippers that I use are made in Germany. The leather that I used is reclaimed leather from a production here in Berlin. But there are other things that I'm not entirely happy with, and reading this book has prompted me to examine these things, namely, where can I get interfacing that is plastic free so that I can make all my bags entirely plastic free? Where can I get lining fabric that is really sustainably produced? And how can I investigate the current production partners that I work with a little bit further to understand how their environmental and ethical impact on the world is? So be warned, if you read this book, you might set yourself up for some pretty deep changes, but I think it's absolutely worth it. The second book that I want to talk about is a small one that I read on Saturday, and it is 2 recorded lectures. Mary Beard, Women in Power. Mary Beard is a scholar from the UK who mainly focuses on Roman history, and she gave 2 talks in 2014 and 2017 in London. One is called The Public Voice of Women, and the second one is called Women in Power. And she explores how, from ancient history, the voice of women has been cut out of public record, and how women have been not only encouraged but almost forced to not talk in the first talk. And in the second talk, she talks about how the structure of how we perceive power is so male dominated that we can't even assume that a woman has power because of the way that everything around us is structured. I loved these 2, especially because they take a little bit of a different take. She really goes back thousands of years and looks at Greek philosophers and Roman society structure to find very early examples of how women were silenced and how women were not allowed to have any power whatsoever. But then she doesn't really go and transfer that to today's immediate problems, but to today's power structures and to today's public speaking structures. And she argues that the issues that we're having as women in society, the fact that we're not being heard, the fact that people don't assume that we can have power, people who want to take away power, who want to take away the voice from women who are in the public sphere, that all of this is rooted not only in how we learn to behave as men and women, but in a very, very deep structural sense in our society and in the institutions and organizations that govern our society. And I thought that was now I'm hitting myself with it, but I thought that was a fascinating aspect that I had never thought about like that before. And I can really only recommend that you pick this up. It is a little bit challenging in the sense that I think it doesn't really present tons of solutions. It's not okay, this is how we fix this book. It does present some ideas and paths that you can take, but it is really more of a look, almost a philosophical look at why we are where we are today. So don't expect any concrete things, right? But I really, really highly recommend picking this up if you are, especially if you are in a position where you are in whatever way, shape or form, publicly speaking, be it in front of a camera like I am, or being in meetings, things like that. So highly recommend it. I also want to read out a little something here. Okay. So this is about from Women in Power. The big issues that I have been trying to confront are not solved by tips on how to exploit the status quo. I don't think patience is the answer either, even though gradual change will almost certainly take place. In fact, given that women in this country have only had the vote for 100 years, we should not forget to congratulate ourselves for the revolution that we have all, women and men, brought about. That said, if I am right about the deep cultural structures legitimating women's exclusion, gradualism is likely to take far too long, for me at least. We have to be more reflective about what power is, what it is for, and how it is measured. To put it another way, if women are not perceived to be fully within the structures of power, surely it is power that we need to redefine rather than women. Second book recommendation for today. Both of these, great. Alrighty, lovelies. I feel like this has been going on for a long time already. I am really, really excited about all the things that I talked to you about, and I hope you also liked it. I hope you liked the slightly different format in running a creative business. I, for one, really, really loved it, and I would love to hear your thoughts. Do comment down below. Give this a video a thumbs up if you liked it. Again, if you want to have a little email notification every time I put up a new video, then please do hit the subscribe button, and I can't wait to chat to you again in 2 weeks. Bye!